Keanu Reeves quietly saves a stranger, unaware the world was watching. An ordinary day turned extraordinary when Keanu Reeves stepped in to help a struggling stranger. No cameras, no fanfare, just pure kindness. But when the story leaked, it left millions in tears. This is how one selfless act changed a life forever. It was a crisp autumn afternoon in Los Angeles. The city hummed with its usual rhythm, cars weaving through traffic, pedestrians bustling along the sidewalks, and street performers adding their unique melodies to the urban symphony. For most, it was just another day. But for Natalie Sanchez, a struggling single mother juggling two jobs and a mountain of bills, this day felt like the world had conspired to break her spirit. The old, rusted Buick she depended on had sputtered its last breath right in the middle of a busy intersection. Horns blared, drivers shouted, and Natalie's cheeks flushed crimson as she tried to push the car to the side of the road. The steering wheel refused to budge, the vehicle a dead weight. Her son, Diego, sat in the back seat, his wide brown eyes filled with worry. "Mom, are we gonna be okay?" "Of course, baby," she said, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Just stay in the car. Mommy will figure it out." Natalie glanced around desperately, hoping someone might stop to help. Dozens of faces passed, indifferent or hurried. Her chest tightened. She was used to fending for herself, but this was different. Then, out of nowhere, a man in a simple black t-shirt and jeans approached. He was tall, with kind eyes and an aura of quiet confidence. Natalie noticed the helmet tucked under his arm and the motorcycle parked nearby. "Hey," he said, his voice calm and soothing. "Looks like you could use a hand." Natalie blinked, momentarily stunned. The man seemed vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place him. "Oh, thank you," she stammered. "I just need to get it out of the road." Without another word, the stranger stepped into action. He motioned for her to get behind the wheel while he pushed. Muscles flexing, he maneuvered the heavy car to the safety of a nearby parking lot, barely breaking a sweat. As Natalie stepped out, brushing her hands on her worn jeans, she found the stranger crouched by the engine, inspecting the problem. "Looks like your alternator's shot," he said. "You'll need a tow, but I can get you a jump start to reach a service station." Natalie hesitated. I can't afford a tow right now. I was just trying to get to work." The man frowned, pulling out his phone. "You have a little one in the car. Let me make a few calls. We'll figure this out." Before she could protest, he was already talking to someone, his tone firm but friendly. She caught snippets of the conversation. "Yeah, right away. Stranded with a kid. I'll cover it." Natalie felt her throat tighten. Who was this man? Why was he helping her without asking for anything in return? As the minutes passed, the tow truck arrived, and the stranger covered the cost without a second thought. He turned to Natalie, his expression warm but unassuming. "You're all set now. Make sure you get that alternator looked at, okay?" Tears welled up in Natalie's eyes. "I don't know how to thank you. You didn't have to do any of this." The man smiled gently. "Just pay it forward someday." With that, he tipped his helmet, climbed onto his motorcycle, and rode off. It wasn't until later, when the tow truck driver casually mentioned the name of her mysterious savior, that the pieces fell into place. "You know that was Keanu Reeves, right?" Natalie's jaw dropped. The kind stranger who had come to her rescue wasn't just anyone. He was one of the most beloved actors in Hollywood. For Keanu Reeves, the day had started like any other. He'd woken up early in his modest Los Angeles home, brewed his usual cup of coffee, and spent a quiet hour tinkering with his collection of motorcycles. Keanu found solace in these morning rituals, moments that kept him grounded in a world that often felt larger than life. Fame had been a peculiar companion. It had gifted him extraordinary opportunities and a platform to share stories that moved millions. But it also came with its challenges, the isolation, the constant scrutiny, and the way people often forgot that behind the camera and the accolades was just a man. Keanu's life had been marked by loss, shaping his quiet resilience. He didn't dwell on the tragedies that had touched his life, but they lingered in the corners of his mind, reminding him to appreciate every moment and, above all, to practice kindness. That morning, as he donned his leather jacket and strapped on his helmet, he had no idea that an ordinary ride through the city would present an opportunity to make a difference. He wasn't searching for such moments. they seemed to find him naturally. The hum of his motorcycle was a meditative soundtrack as he navigated through the streets. Keanu loved the anonymity that came with the helmet. It allowed him to blend in, to exist in the world without the weight of celebrity. It was during a routine stop at a red light that he noticed the commotion ahead. A small sedan had stalled in the middle of the intersection, its hazard lights blinking frantically. A young woman stood beside the car, her face flushed with embarrassment as drivers swerved around her, honking angrily. Keanu's instinct kicked in. He pulled over to the side of the road, parking his bike near the curb. Removing his helmet, he walked toward the scene, his steps purposeful but unhurried. The woman, Natalie, seemed startled as he approached. Keanu offered a small smile to put her at ease. "Need some help?" he asked. As they worked together to push the car to safety, Keanu couldn't help but notice the weight of worry etched into Natalie's features. Her clothes, though clean and well-kept, were visibly worn, and her son's anxious eyes peeked out from the back seat. Keanu knew that look. It was the look of someone doing their best to hold it together in the face of relentless challenges. Once the car was safely parked, Keanu crouched by the hood inspecting the engine. Cars were a passion of his. He wasn't an expert mechanic, but years of working on his own vehicles had given him enough knowledge to diagnose common problems. "It's your alternator," he said gently, watching her expression shift from hope to despair. Natalie's voice trembled as she explained her situation. She had no money for a tow, no backup plan, and she was already late for her shift. Keanu's heart clenched. He wasn't one to intrude on others' struggles, but he couldn't stand by and do nothing. He'd learned long ago that small acts of kindness could ripple out in ways no one could predict. Stepping aside, he made a quick call to a trusted service he had used in the past. It wasn't charity in his mind. It was simply the right thing to do. When the tow truck arrived, Keanu paid the driver without hesitation. Natalie's protests were soft but insistent. "I can't let you do this," she said, her voice cracking. "You're not letting me do anything," Keanu replied, his tone warm but firm. "You're just accepting help, and there's no shame in that." As the car was loaded onto the tow truck, Keanu glanced at the young boy in the back seat. He gave the child a small wave, and to his surprise, the boy waved back, his timid smile breaking through the tension. After ensuring Natalie had the tow driver's contact information, Keanu turned to leave. He felt no need for recognition or thanks. Knowing she was no longer stranded was enough. But as he slipped on his helmet and revved the motorcycle, he caught one last glimpse of Natalie, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. That image stayed with him long after he rode away. It wasn't about being a hero. It never was. For Keanu, it was about the simple act of being human in a world that often forgot what that meant. The tow truck rumbled away, leaving Natalie standing in the parking lot, her son Diego clinging to her side. She had barely managed to process what had just happened. Her hands shook as she held the business card the driver had given her, Keanu's name scrawled across it in neat handwriting along with a contact number. "Mom, who was that man?" Diego asked, his young voice tinged with curiosity. Natalie stared at the card and whispered, "I think he's someone very special." That night, Natalie sat at the kitchen table of her small apartment, replaying the encounter in her mind. The kindness of the stranger, Keanu Reeves as she now knew him, felt like a spark of light in her otherwise grueling existence. She had intended to write him a thank you note, but words failed her. How could she possibly convey the depth of her gratitude? Natalie decided to do the one thing she could, share her story. Logging into her rarely used social media account, she posted a heartfelt message detailing her car trouble and the stranger who had come to her rescue. She didn't name Keanu directly, respecting his evident desire for privacy, but her words painted a vivid picture. "Today, a man stopped to help me when no one else did. He pushed my car out of an intersection, called for a tow truck, and paid for it without asking for anything in return. I only learned his name after he had left. What struck me most wasn't just his kindness. It was how quietly he acted, without fanfare or expectation. Whoever you are, thank you. You reminded me that there is still good in the world." Natalie clicked post, expecting nothing to come of it, but within hours her post began to spread like wildfire. Friends shared it, then strangers, and soon it reached the feeds of fans who quickly pieced together the identity of the stranger. The internet lit up. Keanu Reeves, famously private and known for his humility, had inadvertently become the centerpiece of another heartwarming story. The next morning, Natalie awoke to a flood of notifications. Her post had gone viral. Media outlets picked up the story, and headlines like, "Keanu Reeves's quiet act of kindness goes viral," began circulating. Natalie's phone buzzed constantly with messages from people around the world, offering support, sharing their own stories of being helped by strangers, or simply expressing how moved they were by the tale. Among the many comments was one from a local journalist who wanted to interview her. Though hesitant at first, Natalie agreed, hoping that by sharing her story, she could inspire others to be kind. As the story gained traction, Natalie's struggles also came to light. Interviews revealed her challenges as a single mother trying to make ends meet, working 2 jobs while raising her son. Donations began pouring in from anonymous benefactors moved by her story. Keanu, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware of the media storm. It wasn't until a close friend sent him a link to an article that he realized his simple gesture had become a global phenomenon. He sighed, shaking his head with a wry smile as he scrolled through the article. While he appreciated the sentiments of those touched by the story, he felt uneasy about the attention. For Keanu, the act had been about helping a person in need, not seeking praise. Still, he couldn't ignore the outpouring of love and positivity the story had generated. A part of him felt humbled by how one small act could ripple outwards, touching so many lives. A week later, Natalie's phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Answering cautiously, she heard a warm, familiar voice. "Hi, Natalie. It's Keanu." Her breath hitched. "Mr. Reeves! Oh my, thank you. I didn't expect you to call." He chuckled softly. "Please call me Keanu. I heard about your post, and I wanted to check in. Are you and Diego doing okay?" "Yes," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Thanks to you. I'm overwhelmed by everything that's happened. I never meant for this to go public. I just wanted people to know how much your kindness meant to us." Keanu's voice softened. "You don't need to apologize. I'm glad it's inspired people. But how are you? Are you getting the help you need?" Natalie hesitated before admitting, "People have been very generous. It's almost too much. I'm just trying to figure out how to pay it forward." Keanu paused, his mind turning. "I have an idea," he said. "If you're open to it, I'd like to meet you and Diego again. Let's see how we can turn this into something meaningful." Natalie agreed, and a few days later they met at a quiet cafe. Keanu listened as Natalie shared her story, her challenges, and her dreams. By the end of the conversation, an idea had taken shape. The cafe was quiet that afternoon, its usual hums subdued by the gravity of the conversation unfolding in the corner booth. Natalie sat across from Keanu, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of tea. Diego sat beside her, shy but wide-eyed, stealing glances at the actor who had become an unlikely hero in their lives. Keanu leaned forward, his voice steady but filled with purpose. "Natalie, I've been thinking a lot about your story and about all the stories that this one act has sparked. I don't think it's a coincidence that it's resonated with so many people. There's a lot of need out there, but there's also a lot of kindness waiting to be tapped into." Natalie nodded, her heart pounding as she listened. It felt surreal to sit here with him, discussing not just her struggles but the possibility of something bigger. "I want to help," Keanu continued. "Not just you, but others like you, people who need a little boost, a little kindness to get back on their feet. I have the resources to make that happen, but I need someone who understands what it's like to be in those shoes, someone who can help me make a real difference. Someone like you." Natalie's eyes widened. "You mean?" Keanu smiled gently. "I want to start a fund, a program that provides direct assistance to people in tough situations. We'll help with things like car repairs, rent, groceries, whatever they need to get through a rough patch. And I'd like you to help me run it. Who better to lead the charge than someone who's lived it?" Natalie's breath caught in her throat. She had been prepared to thank Keanu for his generosity and move on, but this was something she hadn't dared to imagine. I don't know what to say," she stammered. "Say yes," Keanu replied with a small chuckle. "We'll take it slow, one step at a time. I'll provide the funding and the connections. You'll bring the heart." Natalie glanced at Diego, who gave her an encouraging nod, his youthful face lit with excitement. She turned back to Keanu, tears brimming in her eyes. "Yes," she whispered. "I'd be honored." In the weeks that followed, Keanu and Natalie worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They launched the initiative quietly, focusing on helping local families in Los Angeles. Natalie poured her heart into the project, drawing on her own experiences to ensure every decision was made with compassion and dignity. The first grant went to a young man named Luis, a delivery driver whose car had broken down just days before he was due to start a second job. The program paid for the repairs, allowing Luis to keep both jobs and eventually move his family into a better apartment. Then there was Cassandra, a widowed mother of three who had been on the verge of eviction. The fund stepped in to cover her rent for 3 months, giving her time to find a stable job and rebuild her savings. Each story was a testament to the power of small acts of kindness, magnified by a simple willingness to care. Months later, Keanu invited Natalie and Diego to attend a small gala celebrating the program's success. The event was understated in true Keanu fashion, but it brought together dozens of people whose lives had been touched by the initiative. As Natalie mingled with the guests, she felt a profound sense of purpose. For so long, she had been on the receiving end of hardship and kindness alike. Now she stood as a beacon of hope for others, proof that circumstances could change with a little help and a lot of heart. Toward the end of the evening, Keanu took the stage. The crowd quieted, all eyes on the actor who had become an unexpected hero in their lives. "I didn't set out to make a difference," he began, his voice calm but resonant. "I just wanted to help someone who needed it. But what I've learned is that kindness is contagious. When you help one person, it inspires others to do the same. And together we can create a ripple effect that changes the world, one small act at a time." The room erupted into applause, tears glistening in the eyes of many who had experienced the truth of his words firsthand. After the gala, Keanu and Natalie stood outside under a canopy of stars. Diego had fallen asleep on a nearby bench, his head resting on Natalie's coat. "Thank you," Natalie said, breaking the comfortable silence. "Not just for helping me that day, but for everything since. You've changed our lives, and so many others." Keanu shook his head humbly. "You're the one who's made it happen. All I did was give a little push. The real work has been yours." Natalie smiled, her heart full. For the first time in years, she felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. A year had passed since that fateful autumn day when a stalled car had brought two lives together. Natalie stood on the porch of her modest home, the one she had managed to secure with the stability the program had brought her. The evening air was cool, and Diego played with a group of neighborhood kids in the yard, his laughter carrying across the street. Inside, Natalie's dining table was covered with papers and a laptop. The Kindness Fund, Keanu's name for their initiative, had grown beyond their wildest dreams. What had started as a local project had expanded, gaining the support of communities, small businesses, and even celebrities inspired by the story of a single, selfless act. Natalie glanced at a framed photo on the wall, a snapshot taken at the program's launch event. In it, Keanu stood beside her and Diego, his arm draped casually around her shoulders, his signature warm smile beaming at the camera. Beneath it was the inscription he had written in his characteristically understated way. "To Natalie and Diego, proof that one act of kindness can change everything." Meanwhile, Keanu sat in his small book-filled study, a cup of tea cooling beside him. He scrolled through the latest updates from the Kindness Fund, smiling at the stories of people helped by their work. The single mother who'd started her own catering business, the veteran who'd finally found a home, the teenager whose tuition had been paid by an anonymous donor. Keanu didn't need the recognition. He never had. What mattered was the change. He thought back to Natalie's tearful gratitude that day in the cafe, to Diego's hesitant smiles that had turned into bursts of laughter. He thought about the thousands of people now touched by what had started with a single stalled car. "Just pay it forward someday," he had told Natalie. She had done more than that. She had turned it into a mission. Months later, the Kindness Fund held its first annual benefit gala, a celebration of its success and a fundraiser for future initiatives. Natalie was the guest of honor, and Diego stood proudly by her side. Keanu kept to the background, watching as she took the stage. Her voice, once so quiet and uncertain, was now filled with conviction. "When my car broke down that day, I thought I had reached the end of my rope," Natalie said. her voice trembling slightly. But one stranger's kindness reminded me that I wasn't alone. That moment didn't just change my life. It gave me the strength to change the lives of others. And that's what this is all about. Each of us has the power to make someone else's day, someone else's life, a little better. It starts with one act, one moment of compassion. The room erupted in applause, and Keanu, standing at the back, felt a deep sense of satisfaction. He caught Natalie's eye and she smiled, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had shared. As the applause faded, Natalie's voice returned, this time addressing the audience and, unknowingly, anyone who would hear her story later. To everyone out there, she began, her voice steady and clear. Remember this. You don't have to be rich or famous to make a difference. You don't need a grand gesture or a perfect plan. Sometimes it's the smallest act, a helping hand, a kind word, a moment of empathy that can change everything for someone else. And when you do that, you create a ripple effect. Your kindness inspires others, and their kindness inspires even more. It's like planting a seed that grows into something far greater than you could ever imagine. So the next time you see someone in need, don't hesitate. Be the reason they believe in good again, because the truth is, the world is watching, not to judge, but to follow your example. As the audience rose to its feet in a standing ovation, Keanu quietly stepped outside, slipping away from the spotlight as he always did. The world didn't need to know he was there. All that mattered was that it had seen the power of kindness, and it had begun to believe again. What about you? What small act of kindness can you share today? Whether it's lending a hand, offering a smile, or simply listening to someone who needs it, your compassion could be the spark that changes everything. You have that power.